I now need to tell you how to plan an expedition in 15 minutes. So buckle up, people. This is going to be a rapid, quick-fire round, possibly with some turbulence at some point during the course of the next 15 minutes. But the first thing I'm going to do is use 2 of those 15 minutes to show you a short video to get us all in the mood. So here we go.
Any minute now it's going to crack and open beneath you. This is such a dangerous environment.
You could hear the ice breaking. This is the difference between life and death.
My mind wants to keep going, but my body can't keep going.
If anything here moves, we don't stand a chance.
We're going to the North Pole, there's going to be polar bears, it's going to be stupidly cold, there's going to be ice below you, there's no solid ground.
11 women from across Europe and the Arab countries, and we're going to ski the last 100 kilometres to the North Pole.
When we first said that we were going to come and do some polar training in the desert of Oman, a lot of people raised their eyebrows. It gets more bizarre by the minute.
I wanted to put together an expedition that brings together women.
This is it!
This trip is not just for me, it's for all the women out there, for them to reach out for their potential.
2 years, this has changed a lot in my life, this expedition.
It's ordinary women doing something absolutely extraordinary.
Thank you. That's very kind, but we haven't got time. I've only got 15 minutes. So that was a big expedition. This happened back in 2018. It was a big project. We were a team of 10, plus me on top of that. Most of the team were novices, so we had to do a lot of training and preparation. It was an expensive location we were going to, the North Pole, so we needed a lot of funding. It's a difficult and dangerous environment, so the logistics had to have a lot of time invested in them. And on top of all of that, we had a large film production and an ambitious science program to complete. But all of that you saw in that little trailer, expeditions are like an iceberg. All of that was sort of the tip of the iceberg above the water. That's what everybody else gets to see. That's the end product. What people don't get to see is the mass of that iceberg that's under the water, and that is all the hard work and dedication that has to be put in place in order to get that tiny little visible bit above the water. And nobody will ever get to see or appreciate just how much hard work that is. That's just the nature of it. You'll never get a pat on the back or a thank you for it. But it has to be done in order to get that wonderful, majestic bit that you get to remember and pass on and share. And there's a lot of misconception about planning an expedition, particularly one like this that looks all sort of nice and glossy now. I think people assume that I must have, a full-time staff, a well-resourced office to put these things together. But this expedition, just like all of my expeditions and the majority of expeditions that eventually become reality, they start with one person and one idea. And there is no secret recipe, some secret how-to list that you follow step by step and get a perfect bake every time. I hate to break this to you, but you have to start from scratch every time and build everything from the ground up. Most of the time, you have to do all of that yourself. There are no shortcuts, and it never gets any easier, no matter how many times you do it. But that said, this is the good news, there is lots of advice out there to help you. And one of the best places that you can start is the Expedition Resources page on the RGS website. And the first place you should look is the Expedition Handbook. And you can download it for free in its entirety from the Expedition Resources page. Read that book from cover to cover and make sure it's one of the first things you do, because there is so much information in there. Then you should listen to the Adventure podcast, which is also free. And if you look at all the people that have contributed to that podcast, they are all experts in their field, and they are giving you insights and the benefit of their experience throughout that podcast. So listen to all of those episodes. But then there's plenty of other resources that are a bit more specific on GIS, field techniques, expedition medicine. Some are free and some are links to paid resources that you have to pay for. But do be aware, not all advice is good advice. You know, if you're going to the RGS website and listening to a resource or reading a resource through that website, you know it's come from someone that has enough experience and you really should be listening to what they're saying. Whether you choose to follow that advice or not is totally up to you. But you know, be aware, if you put into Google, how do I plan an expedition, you get something like 42 million hits. But the vast majority of that won't be worth your time reading or listening to. So just be aware of what advice you are listening to. And there is no substitute for getting out there and doing it yourself. There is no way around that. You can't learn this stuff without going out there and doing it. So start small. Don't make your first trip a really expensive expedition of a lifetime to the North Pole or the South Pole. Start small. Learn your skills. Even if this is a project that you must do and you must do it now, build in some smaller trips as training exercises. Do anything you can just to get that experience under your belt. The other bit of good news is that there are some common elements to any expedition, no matter how different the environment, purpose, or makeup of that expedition. And there are some best practices that are really well established and that will help to guide you on the path to putting together a really good, robust expedition. So I've called this the anatomy of a plan, if you will. So this is my gingerbread cutout of a plan. And we're going to go through the anatomy of a plan. So up here, up in the head, it's the idea. This is the starting point of every single expedition, the idea. But the idea isn't simple. It can be really complex. An idea isn't a stationary thing. It grows, it evolves. So don't be surprised if the project you end up completing bears very little resemblance to that initial idea. But that's okay. That's just the way that it is. And when you're deciding on that idea, I always think a good measure is that if it's an idea that just won't go away, that sticks in your mind, that pops into your head every time you're staring out a window or have a quiet 5 minutes, those are ideas that are worth exploring further. But make sure it's something that you've got a passion for, because this could be taking up every waking moment of the next 3, 4, 5 years of your life. Are you still going to feel as passionately about this in 2 or 3 years' time as you do right in that moment? And this brings me to sort of integrity of purpose, is what I've decided to call it. If what you actually want is a road trip across Africa, don't try and just sort of plaster some purpose on the top of it. It will become obvious that that's what it is. If what you want is a road trip across Africa, think about, well, what causes really get you going? What are you passionate about? How can you turn that desire to make that road trip into a purpose that is worthy of completing, worthy of support, and worthy of sharing afterwards? So make sure you have that integrity of purpose. And when you're thinking of that aim, those goals, make sure that at the heart of them, there is the 3 T's: sensitivity, inclusivity, and diversity. That has to be the foundation of everything that you do, from the original conception of the idea through to making the reality happen. And it might be that you need to go and do some really hard work in setting up the foundations. For example, collaborations with local collaborators. That can be a big time investment, but it's worth doing it to make sure that you have those 3 T's at the heart of what you're doing. And if your idea isn't getting traction now, don't spend years bashing your head against a brick wall. Tuck that idea away and think of another idea that does gain some traction now. You can always draw that idea out of your back pocket at some time in the future when maybe it will land better. Oh my goodness, I am so running out of time already. So right at the heart of my gingerbread cutout, I've put the team. I mean, it's up to you where you start putting your idea down and making it into reality. But I think starting with the team is practically a really good idea because then you have more hands to help. And the other benefit of making that an early thing, putting your team together, it means that that team can have real ownership of the idea. You want your team to feel that they have as much responsibility for the success or failure of your project as you do. And it's an unpopular idea, but I stick by it, that making sure your team makes some kind of financial contribution to the costs of the expedition is a good way of ensuring you have that dedication, ownership, and responsibility for the project. So it's worth considering. And also consider a contract of expectations right at the outset with your team. It sounds very formal very early on, but there are many times you will thank yourself for doing that. Who has the rights to write the book at the end of it? Who has the rights to the film footage? Who is going to make sure this happens? Who is going to make sure that happens? Get it all set out right at the beginning so that you don't end up with a horrible situation later. And I need to speed up. I've just written down here, eliminate disruptors. That sounds a bit harsh. Team dynamics is the hardest thing you will do out of the whole expedition. Trekking across a desert or a polar plateau has nothing on trying to keep your team focused on the goal and friends just for the length of your expedition. Team dynamics is hard. If there is someone in your team who just is not working out for whatever reason, I've learned I'm now much quicker to think of the option of maybe this just isn't the right team or the right project for this person earlier on, rather than wasting a lot of time trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Right, funding and logistics I've put as the arms of my gingerbread because they really do come arm in arm. See what I've done there? It's a what comes first, chicken and egg situation. They're so interdependent. You can't work out how much funding you're going to need until you've got some idea of what your logistics are. And yet you can't plan your logistics properly unless you know how much funds you're going to have. There's no point putting together a very extensive, very expensive logistical plan and then thinking, oh my goodness, well that needs a $2 million budget and we're never going to get that. So the two things have to go arm in arm with each other. We're going to be talking about grant funding a lot later this morning, but a quick word about commercial sponsorship, which is another common way of funding expeditions and something I've had a lot of experience with. I just want to say sponsorship is not philanthropy. Think of it as a business investment. These companies are investing in you and they want a return on their investment, and you must make sure that you give them that return for the benefit of all of us in the expedition and fieldwork community. Because if a company has one bad experience, they'll be much less likely to support anything again in the future. So make sure you fulfill your commitments. Under promise, over deliver. That is a good rule to live by, and then you'll have these wonderful relationships with sponsors that come back again and again and again. So it's worth investing lots of time and effort in those relationships. Okay, right, this is where we start moving into warp 9. Okay, so the legs of my gingerbread man. This is the foundation that keeps everything else strong. Risk assessment and emergency plans, and the other leg is output and outreach. Neither one is more important than the other. Spreadsheets are your friend. Learn to embrace them. Risk assessments are the most wonderful invention. Don't allow yourself to roll your eyes and push it to the bottom of of your to-do list. Play the what-if game. Go through every element of your expedition going, what if? What if this equipment breaks? What if we get unexpected weather? What if this logistical link falls through? And you will find by doing that process, all sorts of thoughts will spring out of that process, and you will really thank yourself for spending the time on that. But you might notice that nowhere on my gingerbread is there anything about equipment or supplies or any of that glossy stuff. And that's deliberate. I've actually put it down here as the shoes, or snowboard maybe, whatever, at the bottom of my gingerbread. And this is because so often you see expedition teams, and the first thing they do is go out and get the support of a company who's going to give them some equipment or some supplies. It might be that your expedition absolutely needs that. Maybe you're rowing the Atlantic and you need the boat first. But in most cases, that really is the last thing you should worry about, because that can be done right at the end. And you will have a more targeted and focused idea of what it is you actually need. Because the biggest warning I'm going to give you about this is that be aware of the time investment versus the reward that you're getting. I myself fell into this trap. I realized that I put hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of work into a relationship with a supplier in return for 10 pairs of socks. And I thought, what am I doing? It would have been far easier and cheaper just to go and buy the socks and save myself all of this hassle. So be aware of what suppliers and supportive companies are asking in return and the equivalent value of what you're getting back. Oh gosh, I am so out of time. So some quick fire little thoughts. The fount of all wisdom, Nigel Windsor, sitting down there. You once said something that I never forgotten. You said, an expedition is not an expedition until you have filed a report. And that is so true. Until the real work starts after the expedition returns home. Until you've distributed all of those outputs and fulfilled all your promises, the expedition is not over. Take time to finish one project before you start the next. Squeeze every last drop of that insight and outreach and output that you can from a project before you are tempted to start spending your time on the next project. And, oh my goodness, okay, so very quickly, don't do this. Being run over by your own sledge as a polar explorer is really not a good idea. Don't do this. This came about from having the wrong equipment and not enough experience. Don't do that. Don't do this. This is just stupid. Don't do that. Don't drive a vehicle across a crevasse field not roped to anything. That's bad news. And but do this. And by this, I don't mean bring your team members home as corpses. What I mean is take time to absorb the moment. Have a little bit of time out just to appreciate where you are and appreciate the experience that you're having. Keep pushing. If it's not scaring you, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. Draw every last bit out of this privileged experience that you're having. Bring back your knowledge and share it as far and wide as you can. Treasure those relationships on expeditions. They're some of the best that you will ever have. So really treasure those people. And finally, never stop having ideas and never stop turning them into realities. So thank you very much for that whirlwind.